Welcome to the Top Order podcast. It's This Week in Cricket time again. We're going to talk the shambles that was New Zealand versus Afghanistan in Noida. We're going to talk Sri Lanka's win against England in the final test of the English summer. We transition into white ball cricket and talk about the shellacking delivered to England from Australia and Adam Zampa. And we'll also talk the India squad for Bangladesh. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, I tried to keep that upbeat, given my country is all of a sudden shit at cricket again, if you believe the Daily Mail.
At least you got some cricket.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think that's where we've got to start this evening, haven't we? We are recording this Friday evening, New Zealand time. We've got the Sydney Roosters coming up very, very shortly. So we've got an early podcast, an early dinner, and then we've got a 14-minute limit on this podcast, Stu, so we can get to watch the pre-game. But yeah, we've had a little bit of a schmozzle, haven't we, in just outside Delhi. Interestingly, my company have got an office that I deal with quite regularly in Noida. And this week I have literally been listening when I've been on a Teams call to some of my colleagues over there. You can hear the rain on the roof of their building. It's been that full on. But we've probably got to talk a little bit about days 1 and 2. But then realistically, unless you packed your flippers with your gunner more, we're going to struggle over days 3, 4 and 5. But yeah, what do you want to... Yeah, what do you want to say apart from, I guess the disappointment that you've not seen a bit of Test cricket?
You've been threatening to come off the long run all week, so I'm looking forward to it.
I do feel irrationally kind of angry about what's happened.
Irrationally angry, did you say?
Yeah, I realise...
As long as you know it's irrational, that's good.
There's been a month of rain in a week. You know, I've read all the numbers. I've read, how much rain has fallen overnight. I completely understand that days 4 and 5, it seemed like it was raining anyway, like we wouldn't have seen any cricket. But I just feel like there had to be a better solution to... One, either playing at this ground because it seems to just have terrible drainage. There has to be a better solution to digging up the outfield and like trying to replace it from other, from outside the ground.
From the nets.
Yeah. Like holding a household fan over the soil. Like I just feel annoyed that I was excited for Test cricket for New Zealand to have this test, excited to play Afghanistan in a test for the first time and kind of because of the last couple of years, the challenge that Afghanistan have proved against New Zealand in the white ball formats, it was going to be interesting to see how we sort of faced, how we were going to get a handle on things with, now 5 tests in the subcontinent, kind of just excited about this whole prospect. And then there we were, the sun was out and we were sitting there watching them dig up the grass. Like you're sort of laughing over there.
I'm laughing because I've just pulled up Crick Info. And I think we get quite a lot of similar quotes, don't we, after a test match or a one-day international. I have never heard this quote from a coach before and it just tickled me. So Jonathan Trott, Afghanistan coach, sometimes we take things like drainage for granted. And that has got to be the first time those words have come out in that order.
It's true, although there was an equivalent issue with drainage in rugby league circles not that long ago in Sydney. So drainage can be taken for granted no matter where you are in the world. I think that the choice of venue is problematic. We understand the reasonings for it, right? Afghanistan don't get to play cricket at home. They wanted to have an Afghanistan, fan base being able to go there. I think one of the quotes I read was, well, there's no point in us going to Sharjah because no one's going to be able to see us in the UAE. Problematic part of that statement is Afghanistan are now going to Sharjah to play one-day international cricket, I think this week. Yeah. So the rationale that Sharjah or the UAE also too hot to play cricket at this time of year also holds, ironically, no water because if you can play cricket in Sharjah last week, you can play it next week. So it's really disappointing for fans of both teams because, like you said, Afghanistan don't get to play very many test matches. So it is really disappointing for them to have another match cancelled, not because of some geopolitical situation, but because it just happens to be quite wet.
I actually keep flip-flopping a little bit.
I'll see what you did there too. That was very good.
Flip-flopping a little bit. And, when I get down sort of into the weeds of it, it's like there is a venue issue. There is also a scheduling issue. They thought that, or, normally the monsoon season would finish mid-August.
Yeah.
They should be right for this. Still pretty close. I think if you do it from a calendar perspective, the venue, would we have got on at another venue? Probably.
Yes.
Would we have?
Yes, you'd have to think so.
Would we have completed a match? Probably not, based on the amount of rain that they've had. So does that take the venue out of being so much and then the fact that they didn't play a ball, administratively something's gone wrong. You know what I mean? There's a few different aspects to this, and it all just leads to no cricket, really, at the end of the day.
Well, it sounds like Afghanistan, they were there at the ground at some point because Ibrahim Zadran rolled his ankle and is now out for a few months, but I think that was in the build-up. From the sounds of it, they didn't, I don't even know if they made it to the ground on any of the days. They were still at the hotel, and that's sort of I feel that sort of level is where it gets a bit ridiculous. And I suppose, I'm selfishly coming at this from a New Zealand point of view. I wanted to see some cricket. But I think, if this is how this ground handled itself on its, first chance for Afghanistan to play there, I think they must be seriously behind the scenes thinking, do we actually want to make this our venue going forward?
I've read various things to suggest that ground might not be India's favourite ground to play at either, for certain reasons, and I have no facts to back that up, but I would be, if I was Afghanistan, and I'd be looking at the preparation that we're in, not from a effort point of view, because there was lots of effort going into trying to get cricket on, but it's the same conversation that we had with the World Cup in the United States. Is the ground and are all the facilities at the ground sufficient to be able to play Test cricket? Yeah, and I get how much rain happened. We had the same conversation in Florida in the World Cup, but if you can't drain the ground and you can't cover the ground, then that becomes very, very problematic, right?
It is concerning if you think about it from the perspective that it's in India, and India have not played a Test match there.
Mm-hmm. And India have got 20 grounds, I think, or something ridiculous, that have had international cricket, maybe even Test cricket played at them. So they've just, they've got a lot of venues, right?
Venue aside, I was reading they had 1,200 millimeters of rain in 7 days. That's a small child in terms of height. That is a lot.
Big dog.
Even if they had got on the pitch, what kind of game would we actually have seen from a preparation point of view? It would have been very interesting, but.
Yeah,
it would have done a bit, that's for sure. And player ratings from this game, Lip, who caught your eye?
Some good netting, I heard, days 2 and 3.
I don't know. I think all the same ththings, I guess, that we talked about last week sort of apply now to the Sri Lanka series. We're obviously about to talk about Sri Lanka and their performance against England. But, I guess all eyes now go on New Zealand moving forward off to Sri Lanka. I text Raj on day 3, I think, and said I should just get them on the plane there now. They obviously just sat around. I don't know how that's hampered their preparation and things like that, but obviously go there and
do you have warm-up games?
No. So this essentially was the warm-up game. We play next week against Sri Lanka, which is a quick turnaround for Sri Lanka as well to go from England, different conditions for them. So in a way, New Zealand, if they had been able to play this game, might have been better prepared than Sri Lanka, even though, coming into their conditions. So, I guess all eyes go forward to that and hope that we get some cricket in those 2 tests coming up.
Yeah. And Raj, I might start with you on England, Sri Lanka. I know you were glad you didn't come off the long run, I think, last week, in terms of your view on Sri Lanka up until the end of the second test match. But, what caught your eye from their win against England at the Oval?
Yeah, I actually am. I said, it's probably good that I didn't say some of the things that I said off here about the sort of Sri Lankan team. But the comments that I did make around the team sheet for England is they actually aged pretty well in terms of, I didn't think that the team that they put together was a great representation of how they wanted to play their cricket going forward. You look at the extremely long tail they had there at the end, at Dan Lawrence's selection as a test opener. My question to you, Binksy, is, was there a little bit of complacency? And in saying that, I will just caveat that, saying that England had 2 very comfortable test victories in the 2 weeks preceding this. But I don't know, with that team selection, was this just third time unlucky for England?
Yeah, look, I think it's really, really easy to jump on the bandwagon and say that it was complacency and go down the Michael Vaughan route of, they've disrespected the game and disrespected their opponents. I think the reality is we've won 5 tests out of a 6-test match summer. I think, pretty often you would bite someone's hand off as that being your record over the course of a summer, particularly if you were told you would have won both series as well, and the final test of those being a dead rubber. I think ultimately, and I think Mike Atherton summed it up really well on a podcast I listened to. He said, every time England seem to lose now, there's a referendum on whether or not Bazball is the right thing.
Yeah.
And look, I don't think that that's really sustainable for us to continue that rhetoric, particularly now that McCullum's got another 18 months or so to go on his contract. We're going to play this kind of cricket, I think, as we move forward. So to answer your question, I don't think it was complacency. I think what it was, and I've used this word before, it was a lack of ruthlessness from England. They were in a very, very strong position at 4 for 260 in that first innings. Ollie Pope and Ben Duckett. Ben Duckett, I Baldy might have the stats there, but he probably should have 5 or 6 test hundreds more than he's got now. He's got a lot of really, really entertaining and fantastic 80s, 70s and 80s. But I think regardless of the way that you want to play your cricket, you have to, in Test cricket, if you get to 60 or 70, you have to make that count and score 120 or 130 as an absolute minimum. And he hasn't done that, and that's not a criticism of him. He's still averaging, I think, well over 40 in his comeback. He played several years ago and struggled against the spinner Ravi Ashwin and Bangladesh. But Ollie Pope, I think, answered a few critics. Fantastic 100 from him. But really, England
he still only averaged 30 in that series.
Yeah, because he had 2 games where he failed and he averaged 60 in the other series that they played. So, again, if I look at his stats over the summer, I think most batters would say, yeah, fair enough, particularly when you bat at 3. If you've got 6 failures and 6 scores, you probably go, fair enough. I'll bat at the top of the order in England against Duke's ball. Thanks very much. I'll have that.
I think also we looked at this sort of 4 years ago, England batters that were averaging over like 38,
35,
something like that.
Yeah.
And there's very few of them that are averaging over 35 in the international arena. In England.
Yeah. So look, I think that, where they really let themselves down, I think, is not getting 450 in that first innings. And if they did, it was game over, particularly at the rate that they scored. They were out for 325 in 60 odd overs. I think probably if we kind of project forward, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the Sri Lankan performances and maybe even some of the England selections as well. Josh Hull is someone probably we want to talk a little bit about. And Lip, I'm keen to ask you about Bashir as well. Is he, cemented as that spinner, first choice spinner for our winter tours? But I think the point I want to make on the future is Harry Brook showed something that he's not showed for his international career so far, which is a bit of petulance and a bit of frustration. Sri Lanka bowled well outside the sort of 5th, 6th stump channel to him, and you could see that it was riling him. You could see that he was, doing going and standing over there as if to say, I can't reach the ball. You've got to, there's a level of arrogance there and petulance. Well, they can bowl where they want, mate. They've got a plan to you, and it's worked hook, line and sinker. And I'm sure Stark and Hazelwood and Cummins and Boland and all of these guys are going to be going, thanks very much, mate, because we're going to be bowling 6th stump a bit quicker than these guys on pitches that offer a little bit more than this pitch offered. And if you're going to get frustrated on 19 against Sri Lanka, boy, you're going to have a long, long winter in 2025, 2026 down in Australia.
I do think on that sense that, we'll come back to a couple of the English players in a second, but I do think in that way, Sri Lanka deserves a lot of credit for actually the tactics that they employed in this game, because what we've seen from Bazball and teams that have played in that style, I feel like most teams have actually kind of been worn down by it over the course of a series. Their performance almost has got worse throughout a series, and Sri Lanka actually, I don't know, day one, we sat here, last time we were here, it was after day one, and we were saying, look, they looked really flat, and they, their performance over the whole series had been flat at times. but they obviously got together while it was a nice day, but it was too dark for them to be playing, and sat down and actually thought, okay, like what do we have to do here? We've got a little sniff. We're going to have Harry Brook in, new batter. We've got to come up with some sort of scenario to get us back in this game, and it worked. And yeah, a lot of teams have just sort of not that they've just given it away in the last few games again, the last games of a series, but they almost looked broken or defeated by the way that England was playing and the pressure that England was putting on them. And Sri Lanka said, no, well, we've got a different counter for that.
Absolutely. Full credit to Sri Lanka and particularly their bowling unit, because it is possible to get shell-shocked by this England batting approach, right? And to be at the top of your mark thinking, where am I going to bowl to this guy? Because no matter where I bowl to Harry Brook in New Zealand, he was able to hit the ball to all parts of the ground, no matter where you bowled. Whereas Sri Lanka figured out a method that worked for them. They stuck to their guns, they stuck to their plans, and it really, really worked. They deserve a lot of credit for bowling England out twice, and I count the sort of last 15 wickets of the Test match that they took for under 250 runs. So at the back end of the series, you're absolutely right, Stuart. They deserve as much credit as they should get. As much as England are getting a pasting for, not respecting the game, attacking too much, all of that kind of post-test loss rhetoric around all the possible bad things that can happen with Bazball. You've got to take the good with the bad, right? You've had 5 test matches where it's worked brilliantly and England have come out on top, and you've had 1 test match where they got rolled for 150. I'm sorry, but if you're going to play test cricket like that, as a fan, you have to go, okay, well, we're going to take the 150. You just have to. And all of the members of the Red Tops that are out for blood at the result of this, they just want to have something to write about, honestly, because if you live by the sword, you've got to die by the sword sometimes. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is with this mode of playing cricket.
I've got a question for anyone who wants to answer it. Do you think that Sri Lanka could have played like this with the series still in play? I feel like a lot of what they did in this test match, they played like a team who had nothing to lose. They went out there in the 4th innings, they chased down 200 at over 5 and over 40 overs. Like that's a team that's going to go out there and go after it, and they've got nothing to lose. I feel like had they got bowled out for 70, they would have had nothing to lose. They're not going to get any negative press around that. The 4th test the 3rd test of the series, their last at bat. That is the way to actually counter Bazball a little bit, is to fight fire with fire. Mm-hmm. And having the courage to do that when the series is on the line, I think is what teams are missing at the moment. And this result, I feel like they've had nothing to lose and they've played like it.
Yeah, I guess the counter argument to that, Raj, and we're not going to fix this, and we can talk about it as much as we like, we're not going to fix it, is this essentially was their 3rd game on English soil or 4th game on English soil, after England have had a pretty good tune-up 3 test matches against the West Indies. If they'd have had a couple of warm-up games, who's to say that it wasn't, 1-1 going into this, or that performance would have come earlier in the tour. Maybe this was the time that performance was going to be strung together. And let's be honest, it's great, I think, that they're getting a 3-test series, because Sri Lanka don't get 3-test series against many other nations. They certainly wouldn't get 3 against Australia or 3 against India. So they've got a decent series. And look, I think ultimately we just have to give a massive amount of credit to the way their seamers bowled. They outbowled England's seamers. Particularly, Kumara went for air miles in the first innings, came back and bowled really, really well in that second innings for Forfa. Nissanka was good. Fernando was good throughout the series.
Those 2 wickets that he got,
both the Yorkies,
and Root, they were so crucial, weren't they? Those 2,
absolutely. And I think the other worrying factor for me is England have made a big deal about needing pace to go to Australia, and pace in this attack. I think we showed really what we're missing with Mark Wood injured, because for all of the hype we had throughout the course of that game, 3 of our bowlers operating in the very, very early 80 mile an hour, and even dipping down into the late 70 mile an hour. So Gus Atkinson's speeds have dropped throughout the series, which I think you would expect, right?
He's had a long summer.
He's had a decent summer, and he's not been in the camp for long enough to probably get the full benefit of a year's worth of strength and conditioning work that he will get. So I've got no worries about him pitching up in Australia and probably being able to operate in that 85 or 86 mile an hour. But, Wokes, we know, who's going actually on the winter tour to Pakistan. He was, down at 78, 79 miles an hour. Josh Hull, young guy, lot of chat. I thought he actually performed pretty well. But again, his speeds were in the, the high 70s, particularly in that second innings. And Ollie Stone, he's the guy that they've kind of gone, well, he's the replacement for Mark Wood. He's not. He's 85, average and 87 ceiling, whereas, Mark Wood is 95 ceiling and probably 89, 90 average. And
Joffre's really the one they want back,
Joffre's the one that they probably want. If they can get Joffre and Woody fit, then I think that's what they'd be aiming for. And Atkinson, I thought, had a fantastic summer, but definitely some worries there for England. I do want to ask you about Shoaib Bashir.
Before you do that, though, I think that what it showed while you're on the seamers, you can do that. But while we're on the seamers, I do think what showed really glaringly in that particularly in the second innings is actually more. You talked about the pace. I thought it was more the control that they lacked, and what England has done so well, we've touched on it before in this era since McCullum came, is that they've actually just given opposition batters nothing, and their bowling attack has been fantastic throughout their time. And they've had the likes of Anderson and Broad and those guys.
And Stokes, and which is nearly 1,500 test wickets.
Yeah, and Wokes and Stokes, who have just... They bowl in good areas, and they don't let batters get away. And when you go through Sri Lanka's run scoring in that second innings, there was a lot of ball on leg stump, work down to fine leg, ball on leg stump, work it into the leg side, and that just let the pressure off. And it meant that when they got a bad ball, they could hit it for a boundary. And I think that's actually the most glaring thing, and actually probably to be expected, because you look through that lineup, and apart from Wokes, it's a super inexperienced. We're talking about Atkinson, we've given him heaps of praise, but he's still very inexperienced in the test arena. So, I don't think that's alarming necessarily. It's more just, that you're going to have to get some of those guys back. Not Broad and Anderson, but you're going to have to get some of the more experienced players back. And I guess if you're not going to have those, then I don't know. Maybe there is that's probably a conversation for later. But is there some role that Wokes has to play in that attack, because he just simply doesn't give it away? So
yeah, and look, I think going to Pakistan, that's the role he'll play.
Yeah,
and the role that Anderson has played really well. He's found ways to get people out on pretty much any surface. And I think I said to you guys, and I said in another WhatsApp chat, no one actually credited this at all, but I said, we've got a bunch of tanks. We need the odd sniper. It can't all just be about overpowering with pace. You need someone with that surgical precision and that ability to be accurate. But I do want to ask you about Bashir. It's the third bloody time.
Okay.
So if I just frame this like from a test match perspective, 9 test matches in now, 32 wickets, at an average of 35 and 3 5-wicket hauls. If we compare that to his first class record, he's averaging 46 3 5-wicket hauls. All of those obviously is test match 5-wicket hauls, and 48 wickets. But I'm probably less interested in the stats, Lip, and more interested in what you think of him as an off spinner. Like, has he got something about him? Because if I compare maybe Nathan Lyon, when he came onto the scene, his numbers weren't great for a decent period of time. And now, similar in terms of he's relatively tall for a spinner, isn't he, Nathan Lyon? I think he's 6 foot and a bit, not as tall as Bashir, obviously.
Yeah.
But what are your impressions of Shoaib Bashir? Particularly, can he carry the attack as the premier spinner in the subcontinent for England this winter?
Well, I think Pakistan's going to present an interesting challenge in that some of the pitches that that certainly New Zealand have played over there, and that England have played have been flat. So they might present a different challenge than England, and a much different challenge than playing in India or anything like that. But I think your encouraging parts of Bashir's performance at home have been the amount of turn that he's been able to get. And I mean, all you guys sitting around the table know that that's kind of the number one prerequisite for me as a spinner, that you can actually spin the ball and spin it big, and Bashir does that, so I really, really like that. I think in terms of carrying the attack, I don't know that now at this stage in his career, he doesn't strike me as that kind of bowler, and I don't think that they want him to be. He's a wicket taker. I know that off spinners traditionally don't necessarily have that role. It's often seen the off spinner is certainly picked in many test sides to be the holding bowler, the bowler that can bowl at the other end while your seamers work or your leg spinner or someone else comes on and tries to pick up the wickets. But I think Bashir is seen in that attack as someone who can bowl a brilliant delivery that can get anyone out, that can, because of the way he sort of shuffles in and sometimes he skids the ball. And, we saw earlier in the series, I think, wasn't it, the one that just skidded on and, didn't bounce. Sometimes he gets huge bounce and turn. I think that's the role that he's going to play. And I think it's worth investing. From out of all the ones that we've seen, I know you love Tom Hartley from his performance over in India, but I think Bashir is the one that's, if they want a wicket taker, Bashir is certainly the one. Hartley's probably better equipped to maybe do the role that you're talking about in terms of a holding bowler.
Yeah, I think Hartley is not on this tour, I don't think. So I think they've gone with Jack Leach and Rayan Ahmed as the other spinner. So, yeah, look, I think Hartley was a real horses for courses selection. I just liked his gumption, I think, was the main thing. And, he wasn't the best spinner in the world, but he bounced back really well from getting pasted in that first innings in India. But, yeah, I'm glad that you like the look of him. Definitely, I like the fact that he gives it a really, really big rip. I think really, really promising debut home summer for him.
I want to get back to Sri Lanka in a second, but Raj, you touched on Dan Lawrence before. I think we should discuss him because you mentioned that Pakistan series. He hasn't been selected in that squad.
Jordan Cox as the other batter yet.
Huge missed opportunity. Is he ever going to play? I feel like this sounds silly, but maybe that's his chance, and he's now done.
That's for Raj, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, he's been hanging around, hasn't he, as the reserve batter for a long time in the English squad, and a spot came up, and he just had to play with what was in front of him. It's not his fault that he was put in that position.
No.
But Binksy, is that him done? Are you putting a line through him?
Well, yeah, I probably am actually.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I think that they've been really, really good at doing in the last wee while since McCullum and Stokes have been at the helm is they've given guys a test too many occasionally, and those picks have seemed to have come off. But I think they've also displayed that they can be ruthless when they need to be ruthless. And I think there's a couple of examples now. Ben Folkes is one. Hardly put a foot wrong, really.
Yeah.
But they went, do you know what? He doesn't fit within the way that we want to play. And I think what's interesting for me is Zach Crawley's fit again and in the squad for Pakistan. So clearly Lawrence wasn't going to go and need to open the batting there. They've not picked another opener. They've picked Jordan Cox, who is a lower order player. He has a slight benefit in that he holds the gloves as well, or he owns some gloves in the sort of modern rhetoric. And so he provides that cover. Lawrence would have been there and potentially providing a little bit of extra spin when we've actually got a few options in that space, not least Chris Wokes' off breaks, if you saw those. But look, jokes aside, I think yes, Lawrence has now gone below a bunch of players that I think will come through. Jordan Cox, being one of them, and there's probably another couple in the mix as well that I think we might see sort of up the order as England pick their spare batters. I do really feel for Dan Lawrence because in hindsight, did he say, I don't really want to open actually, mate? No, I'll wait till there's a spot down the order. But again, it's really going to be pretty difficult to do that, isn't it? Would you really turn down a 3-test match run against Sri Lanka, including a game on your home pitch? You probably wouldn't. So, he might be ruining that in a few years' time. But yeah, I think he's certainly going to be on the sidelines for a little while, if not forever.
Baldy, you were about to jump in before?
No, I just wanted to talk about the Sri Lankan batters before we move off this series because a lot's been made of, mostly by me, their lack of run scoring ability. And we just really need to give them credit when their key batters stood up, and not only did they stand up, but they went some of them stood up and went and made big tons. Particularly in that chase in the second innings. Sri Lanka made light work of it because one of their top three stood up and got 100, went on and got a big score. As much as we've been criticising England for not doing it, we need to give Sri Lanka some credit when their top three in particular go on and make our big score, which they did in the second innings of this game. Most of the time for Sri Lanka, it's too few and not enough big scores. But when they do it, they look like a really competitive cricket side. So they just need to be able to do it more often. Easy to say, right?
Was good, wasn't he? That I mean, you talked about it before. The way he went about it, the way he went about it. Obviously, scored that 60-odd, looked really good. Good catch to get him. But that 100, apart from his running in that test, which maybe left a little bit to be desired, he looked flawless in that test. And he's certainly someone I'm a bit concerned about for New Zealand going over there. He's going to be a crucial cog and. Obviously, how we're going to kind of manage our bowling attack because you want to get him early, otherwise he gets stuck in there and he's going to be difficult to get rid of. And Mendis is the other one, isn't he? I mean, honestly, we praised him heaps last week. I don't know how much more there is to say, but he's just great to watch. He's got
very good to watch.
Yeah, so still hits beautifully through that offside, and I actually think probably that was the turning point of this game, that partnership. I mean, the wickets that they got on that second day were really important, but that partnership with Dhananjaya de Silva, they were 90-odd for 5 or 6 or whatever it was, turned it to 220. Unfortunate for Josh Hull to drop that catch, which would could have changed that game. But I think that was the crucial partnership, and I guess the composure that Mendis has shown throughout this whole series has been fantastic. So yeah, massive credit to him.
Let's move on. I don't want to, but we've got to talk about the first T20, I think. Australia, England, boarding. You might as well. We always give the spoils to the victor, don't we?
Oh, there's not a lot to crow about, really, because it's only one T20 in a series that's still alive. But it is nice to get one over the old foe, so I will take some credit. Lots of enjoyable little things coming out of the Australian setup over the last couple of weeks, and I'm including the games against Scotland here. And the one that I want to maybe just touch on a little bit is the form for Josh Inglis and Cameron Green in that middle order for Australia, because that 4-5 position has often been somewhat troubling for Australia, particularly when Maxwell doesn't fire. So it's really, really pleasing to see Josh Inglis get some runs, get another very quick fire 100, but also Cameron Green to step up when it counted. We haven't seen the best of Tim David in this series, particularly. I think he had maybe one good game against Scotland where he might have bashed a few runs at the end, but we've seen meaningful contributions from Cameron Green in this series with bat and ball, which is quite pleasing. And, injuries aside to Xavier Bartlett, who I think has pulled up with a side strain and will be out for a wee while. There's been lots to like about the development of this Australian team over the last couple of weeks. And it was a good win against a good England side. I mean, this is not a bad England side, but Australia made them look like, they were a cut above in this first T20, I think.
Where do you sit from Team Matthew Short or Team Fraser-McGurk side of things?
I'm glad you asked this because I was trying to figure this out in the car on the way to this recording. And the decision to drop Jake Fraser-McGurk for this series, having played him just 3 games against Scotland, makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. Let's put aside Matthew Short's credentials and whether or not he's deserving of a spot in the Australian team, because he is absolutely 100% a deserving player who should be in the Australian setup and deserves his opportunity, and I hope he makes the most of it. He's been a terrific cricketer in white ball domestic cricket for a number of years. He's been the leading scorer in Big Bash. He deserves his shot, no question. But the decision to pick Jake Fraser-McGurk for 3 games and then drop him from the side completely makes absolutely zero sense to me. This is a young 22-year-old kid who needs to be looked after. He needs to have the right messaging around him, and to drop him after 3 games, what message are we sending this kid? A, it's going to mess with his head. 2, what are we dropping him for? Does he have a technical flaw that we've all of a sudden discovered after 3 games? No, there's not enough evidence to support that, even if you include his run against in the Caribbean Premier League a little while ago. So it's not that. Is it that he hasn't come off enough for you in 3 games as an opener in T20s? His role is to take risks in the power play. That's his job. He's failed 3 times. So what? That's what it is. So there's absolutely zero reason for him to be dropped from this team. It's not like they're dropping him to go back and play more domestic T20 cricket, because the only T20 cricket he could be playing is this series against England. It's not like he's then going off and playing, some other form of cricket to get his confidence back up or to fix whatever it is that's all of a sudden wrong with his game. So it makes absolutely no sense to me when Australia should be trying to show faith in their young players, like they showed faith in Finch and Warner, who went on lean trots for a number of years. There's no reason for him to be dropped for this England series. It makes zero sense to me.
Does that mean your team, Jay?
I'm not necessarily team Fraser-McGurk, but I can't understand the decision to drop him for this series. There's nothing that I can think of that makes rational sense why you'd pick him for 3 games and then dump him like an anchor in rough waters.
Can I play devil's advocate there for a second and just sort of, I suppose, look back at how Finn Allen's career has sort of developed for New Zealand. And I think in some ways, maybe New Zealand hung on with him for too long, in terms of through lean trots. I actually thought he'd kind of turned a little bit of a corner in the Pakistan series here where he scored that 100. He looked like he'd sort of changed some technical things. But I think for a long time, we just picked him, and for those same reasons, that was always the justification. It was always, oh, well, he's supposed to take risks, and, he never gets out of the power play. It was sort of excused away. But is this not saying to Jake Fraser-McGurk, like, we've actually got some pretty good people waiting for a shot here? Yes, you're young, and yes, I hope they haven't just kicked him to the curb, but, he's not allowed to come to training and all that. I'm sure they're talking to him behind the scenes and saying, okay, look, that didn't quite work out for you. What we need, from you now, you hope they're doing all of that behind the scenes. But yeah, I don't actually necessarily have a problem with them saying you didn't perform. Matthew Short, like you gave his credentials just before, very, very accomplished player. He's going to have a shot now.
Yeah. Border, you jump in. From my perspective, I think there's a slight difference between Finn Allen and McGurk in terms of the time that Finn Allen was given. He was given a much longer run. I think we've also got to look at the fact that David Warner only retired 5 minutes ago. And there's a bit of a build to the next T20 competition. 3 games against Scotland in Edinburgh isn't really enough of a run. And like Bordy said, I think, as an opener, if you come off once every 4 innings, that's probably a pretty good set of numbers. So who's to say that this 4th one wasn't the one where he was going to get 100? So look, I don't think that's a big enough run in the side, and particularly given there is a decent period of time now to build into this tournament. This almost probably sets him back to the extent that, is he in the running if they go through a narrow cycle of having to give Short plenty of game time? So, yeah, I think it's a pretty dumb decision, but yeah.
The other difference, I think, is that Fraser-McGurk has done it. He's got that pedigree at the IPL, the way he played against some very good bowlers, and he did the job there. But anyway, if we move on to England, so Binksy, if I could ask you a question. The way you bashed our Slack channel, it sounded like you may have whipped into your pillow after that loss. But is it actually really a big deal? You've got the likes of Duckett, Brooks, Butler, all coming back in for the ODI series.
Yeah, so I think obviously there's a big caveat here in that this isn't our first 11. We've got some players. I think the thing that really frustrates me though is we've stuck with some guys, I think, for too long who have mediocre records and who have had now a couple, if not 3 opportunities at World Cups. We were abjectly abysmal in the 50-over World Cup. And then obviously, we got into the final stages of this T20 World Cup. But we were kind of expected to, but we scraped there by virtue of, some run rate calculations and a bit of a
Saved
hope
by the rain
prayer
against Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's not go into that. The issue I have is the likes of Liam Livingstone, to an extent, Sam Curran, the next Jack Callis.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was going to mention it on the Slack channel.
Jamie Overton, who's a bowler who isn't fit to bowl, so they've played him as a specialist batsman at number 7.
Take me through what.
No, I don't want to.
How I don't understand how that's even happened.
No, neither do I. So, and then I think if I look at the people that we can add in, I have no issue with Jordan Cox getting a crack. They've decided that they like the cut of Will Jacks's jib. No problem with that. Phil Salt was brilliant and has been brilliant for a pretty decent period of time now. Bethel as a debutant, I've got no issue with that. But you've got, and I said this, I think, in the Slack channel, you put Joe Root in this side, and we iced that game. We needed 20 odd to win.
He's been a bit busy playing Test cricket, hasn't he?
Well, I understand all of that, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of bits and pieces in here, and unfortunately for me, the bits and pieces aren't adding up to anything of any significance. What I did like is Saqib Mahmood. I thought he was brilliant. I think he is a 3-format player for England if he can get fit. I think he's high 80s. Tails the ball. I think he could be sensational. Nice to see Jofra bowling absolute gas as well. He just makes it look so effortless. So yeah, we've got 2 or 3 guys to come in. But how is a guy? how can you have Sam Curran at 6, Overton at 7, and then Jofra, Jofra's a number 11, batting at number 8. So there's 4 number 11s in that side, 4 number 11s and 2 number 9s. You ain't going to win.
Can I respectfully push back on Livingstone? Well, he took, what did he take? 3 wickets in this game. He took a few wickets anyway, and he also high scored with the bat.
Yeah.
His record might not be okay, but this isn't the game to throw him under the bus.
No, this isn't the game to throw him under the bus. I'm not talking about his performance in this game. I just think he's dead lucky to be there. There isn't
you don't see him playing a part in white ball cricket for England?
No, I do, because for some reason they like him. I'd love Baldy to run this through an algorithm, because his average in Tests is 16, his average in ODIs is 29, his average in T20s is 24. He's not good enough.
I mean, my pushback there is, averages are very different when you talk about 2020 cricket. He's there to cause a commotion, to disrupt, to score runs quickly and take wickets. Australia were about to score 300, and he took 3 wickets in the middle there. Yeah. 2 or 3 wickets, I'm not sure what it was, in the middle there to just rip out.
Yeah, good on him. Order. He's played 50 games of T20 cricket, and he's got 2 50s, and he's a batter.
How many 30s he's got, though? That was the metric we're using now.
Is it? More than his 50s and 100s, but not enough.
I have to say, I love how fired up you are about a bilateral T20 series that means, in my head, absolutely nothing. Well, and we've only had 1 game of it.
Because it's against Australia, so there is extra on it.
There's always spice.
There's always spice.
We wouldn't have talked about this game if it wasn't Adam and I sitting here talking about Australia versus England. Yeah. We would have moved on and talked about something completely different.
We might have mentioned those catches, though.
Can we just talk about what conspiracy theory time, conspiracy theory corner? Did Australia say, well, we'll not pick Jake Fraser-McGurk, we'll drop him for this series if you play Jamie Overton at 7? Was there some kind of selection trade and we're just going to make this a 10-a-side game?
I'd like to see, there might be some betting algorithms that have taken a hammering, but yeah.
I'm not going to make any comment about betting, but conspiracy theory corner, if I put my tinfoil hat on, that's one of them. Because Jamie Overton's not offering you much there at number 7 as a batter, I don't think. Not to rub salt into it, but if he's not bowling, what's he doing?
Well, I don't know. All I can think is, they must have had a raffle or something, and he won, bat in any position you like, raffle.
Once a season, you can choose your game.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah. Should we move on? We're going to cover, I think, India, Bangladesh coming up. So India squad and Bangladesh squad's actually announced for that. Anything catch our eye? I guess the thing for me is Rishabh Pant back in with the little cross symbol as wicket-keeper batter. There's 2 other guys in the squad that have kept wicket in recent times for India, KL Rahul and Dhruv Jurel, but you would expect that Rishabh Pant's going to take those little SG gauntlets.
Feels a bit tough for Jarrell, doesn't it? After how he did against England, but obviously you can't just have the jumper for a long time. I'm sort of more interested in this series now than I thought I might be, primarily because of the way Bangladesh performed against Pakistan, and now I guess this is going to be a huge test. Can they carry that form through to this India side? And I guess for the India point of view, for me it's probably more a longer term view that I'm having on this side, because I suppose a little bit we've had a bit of a transition. I feel there is a transitioning sort of stage here for the Indian side, in that we've got the likes of Kohli and Sharma and those and Ravindra Jadeja. Those guys are coming towards the end of their careers. I mean, Kohli in particular might have a few more years to go, but we've seen in the white ball formats, they've, at least in T20 cricket, they've, a lot of them have announced that they're done. In white ball, we don't know what the future holds for some of those guys after the Champions Trophy. We're sort of, thinking maybe that might be the signal for some of those guys to start moving on. Is it going to be the same in Test cricket, or is, because when you look at this side, there's a lot of youth in it as well. There's the Gills and Jaiswal, and Sarfaraz has been maintained. We've got Dhruv Jurel, we've got, and we've got bowlers in there like Yash Dayal and Akashdeep. So we're sort of, in a way, you got to give them huge credit, because it does feel like they've got the perfect balance. They've got all this experience there, and it's great that they can bring in some of these young guys and start to, really build that depth. But I'm fascinated to kind of see how that develops, because for every Test nation, we're always talking about, particularly the ones we're most interested in, what is the succession planning and all of this kind of stuff. And India's in a prime position now to actually kind of put that in place and have these other guys ready to step into their shoes immediately.
Can someone tell me a little bit more about Sarfaraz Khan? Because that's not a name that I'm intimately familiar with in terms of Indian cricket. There is a Sarfaraz that played for Pakistan, but of all the batters that we've talked about in India over the last 12 to 18 months or so, and all of the different opportunities that we've seen sort of come and go for Indian players, his name hasn't been on our radar very much. Can someone tell us?
He was in the England series.
He was
fantastic in the England series.
Okay, did I just not pay attention to the England series? Fair enough.
Yeah, so
they were on those shows, I think.
Yeah, he got 350s out of 5 digs in that series, and
he was
fantastic.
He's got a fairly decent first class record.
Absolutely brilliant, and got 160 odd against England Lions in the warm up. So he's I'll take a slightly different point from the one you made, and there actually isn't that much young blood coming into this Indian side from an age perspective. Yes, you've got Jaiswal, who's 21, 22 maybe. Jurel, who's I think relatively young.
23.
But the freaking scary thing is all the other guys that you talked about are 25, 26. And that means that they've got potentially 8, 9, 10 years of Test cricket. And even someone like Kohli's 35. If he's, giving it away in other formats, that's saying to me, either I'm going 100% franchise, which I don't think he will, because his rhetoric around Test cricket has been pretty consistent that he loves it. So there's a scary scenario where you've got Jaiswal, Shubman Gill, Kohli, Axar, Bumrah. You've got those guys for another 5 years. So they better make some room on that mace for engraving India's name a few times, I think, because that's a scary, scary prospect.
India is definitely the only team. I look at their squad and I find it hard to figure out who's been left out sometimes, because it's just so powerful. The incredible thing is that they've got 8 frontline bowlers pretty much, or 7 at least, and 4 of them are spinners and 4 of them are pacers, and who knows who they're going to choose at home. You were just talking about Bashir. If he had to play against these guys, that's an incredibly hard task for him to go up against the experience and skill level of those 4 spinners that India have got in India. But I actually think that this is a very young, talented side. I'm gonna oppose Binksy there. I think the likes of, if you can leave someone like Shubman Gill out of your side at certain times, you've got a very, very strong side.
The one name that I look at, on that note is, I think this is going to be an interesting series, at least for me, for Ravi Jadeja, because again, he's been someone that's announced his retirement from T20 cricket. where is he at in the pecking order? Because we've seen how important Akshar's been for them, and he emerged as the more important spinner out of those two in the T20 formats, obviously completely different. But yeah, where is he going to be able to maintain? He's been such an important part of that lineup, that test lineup for so long, because he can bat at 6 if they want him to. He can bat higher if they want him to, because he's got so much skill with the bat. But he's also been so reliable with the ball, being able to sort of play two different roles, play the holding bowler if they need him to, or he can, in the right conditions, go and get wickets as well. So he's the one name that I'm thinking, okay, like, what does his role, is he able to now just be able to continue that role, or is he the one out of the older players that might be squeezed out first?
But if he's squeezed out, unfortunately, India will only have to be able to rely on Akshay and Ravichandra, Ashwin, and so they're just so deep. Do I think he's going to play the same role? I think that they're going to try. We've seen interesting times where he's batted at 5. I'm looking at the batsmen that they've included in this lineup. I'm not 100% sure what the top 6 is going to look like. Obviously, the main pillars will be there, but maybe we do see something strange like Ravi Jadeja bat in the top 6 or even top 5. We've seen it before. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting series for a whole bunch of different people, including KL Rahul, because what's his role going to be in that middle order going forward? Now that I think about it, yes, Sarfaraz Khan has played some test matches and did do very well. I don't know what I was doing in that
Your
series.
brain just didn't register the name or something.
Because there are so many other names. That's the whole point, right? Is that there are so many other names, and you think about all these players, and he just didn't pop into my head because I'm thinking about.
I remember his dad, and what a legend that.
Look, it must have not crossed my mind, right? So before I make myself look any more of a goose, it is going to be a fascinating series. We expect India to win and win well, do we not? Are we giving Bangladesh any chance? Do we want to talk up their opportunities? Shakib got 9 for in a county game, so he's bringing some form into this series, but a lot's going to rest on him, right?
Oh, look, no, I mean, the young bowlers showed a lot, I thought, in that series against Pakistan. I think that there's certainly, I was encouraged by the way that they performed in that series. And, people like Liton Das obviously just scored 100. Mushfiqur, continues to kind of churn things away. I don't know how old he is.
37, I
think. 30, oh, is he? Yeah. I was going to say, feels like he's been around forever, but, obviously still can churn out the runs every now and again. So, look, they've never been in a better position to come and actually try and challenge India. But as we've said, I mean, India just looks so strong, and they've got a huge amount to play for. And, you mentioned that Mace. That'll be, I would say that's high on the list of things that they want to win now that they've kind of got one of those white ball trophies. So, yeah, I would have thought that the opportunity now to think, okay, well, we can beat Bangladesh at home in 2 tests, and then we can go and destroy New Zealand, which is probably the likely outcome in 3 tests after that. It almost, for them, if they can do that, doesn't matter what happens in the Border Gavaskar, even though, we've already, in a way, heard them kind of talk about, what we need for Australia in the way that England have been doing it for the Ashes. They've already been saying, well, at least the media has, about, people like Akashdeep and Yash Dayal, what they might offer on an Australian tour. But, I mean, we'll talk about that tour when it comes up, because, I mean, the last few ones, particularly in Australia, have been super, super interesting from a neutral point of view. And, not only if you're an Indian or Australian fan, but yeah, I think India wins this series, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So they've got a chance. It's a small chance, is what we're saying.
You're telling me there's a chance.
But it's still a chance.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, that does probably end it, doesn't it? We've got to go off and watch a bit of egg chasing, haven't we? But it is going to be good night. That's what you call rugby, isn't it? No,
I've never heard that before. But
have you not? Call that? No, never.
I suppose it looks a little bit like an egg.
Pop it in the comments below if you've ever heard rugby referred to as egg chasing. I bet you will if you go on Google. Safe for work as well. That kind of search. But look, it is now. Good night. God bless from us here in Auckland. We will see you next week on the Top Order podcast. But now, good night. God bless. We'll see you next week. See you later.